Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, What the Labor Shortage Means for Construction Businesses Like Yours, sponsored by STRUXI by Penta Technologies. My name is Mike Eby, Group Editorial Director for EC&M, and I'll serve as your moderator for today's event. First, let me explain how you can participate in today's presentation. If you have any technical difficulties during our session today, just type your question in the questions window and one of our technical experts will help you out. We recommend you disable any pop-up blocking software or extensions in your browser too, as these can cause issues with your webinar player. Additionally, we welcome your questions during today's event. We will answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A session that'll follow the main presentation. But feel free to send in your questions at any time. To do so, simply type it into the question window on the side of your screen and hit the submit button. Also, be aware that today's session is being recorded and will be made available on the EC&M website within the next week. You'll be notified by email when that archive is available. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Bill Wagner is an experienced business and thought leader who is passionate about driving growth by creating great experiences for customers. He has a long track record of successfully applying cutting-edge best practices from the worlds of business, science, marketing, and economics in a way that scales into all companies, both large and small. His areas of expertise include product portfolio management, strategic planning, corporate and competitive research, communications strategy, brand platform development, data science, and e-business. Bill has experience working with startups, mid-size and Fortune 500 firms, including ABB, Badger Meter, Direct Supply, and AR Network Services. He's also the past president of the Milwaukee chapter of the American Marketing Association and is a sought-after speaker on the topics of product management, digital disruption, business strategy, and the impact of digital experiences on the customer's journey. He's recently informed audiences as a featured presenter for AGCIT, Built World's Product Camp, and the University of Wisconsin e-Business Consortium. As president of Penta, Bill's responsible for leading the long-term strategy, product portfolio, and demand generation activities for the company by focusing on developing solutions that solve the biggest challenges facing our industry. So now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Bill and let him get started on his presentation.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for reading the somewhat long-winded introduction. I have a lot to live up to here, so thank you very much. I'm going to start by saying super happy to be here, excited to talk to this audience. We're going to talk about the labor productivity crunch that we're all facing, and obviously with my background, we're going to talk a little bit about how technology can help you deal with the labor shortage in construction. But I think that in order to really get into this topic, let's talk about the problem first. And let's spend a little bit of time swimming around in the problem space as sort of a framing exercise. And then we'll get into how I think technology can help all of us. And then at the end, I want to leave a little bit of time to talk through what I've seen that's been successful out there in the market. Because in my role at Penta Technologies, I have the good fortune of being able to work with really large, really progressive specialty contractors on a daily basis. And I think we're seeing that there's a repeatable playbook. And I want to share a couple of chapters out of that playbook with everybody. If I do my job and I get through all the material relatively quickly, we'll have plenty of time for dialogue and questions at the end. So don't be shy throwing your questions into the Q&A. We'll do what we can to work through as many of them as possible in the time we have allotted. So to start, I want to get into the labor challenges facing this marketplace. And the slide I have up here right now, talking about electrical contractors specifically, labor is a big part of all of our job costs, and labor costs can get variable because they track along with the progress that you're experiencing on the project. So when we talk to specialty contractors in the electrical space, we get a lot of feedback that the labor cost is the project element containing the most risk for us, because we're essentially functioning as a bank for the owner or the general contractor, floating the labor on this project. And when we start getting behind on the project plan, we can't avoid those labor costs because we got to have the boots on the ground working on the job site. The other thing I think is interesting about electricians in particular is we're talking about capital S skilled tradesmen and women, right? Electricians, it takes a lot of training to become a master electrician. They're doing complex work. A lot of times your electricians have to behave more like a self-contained business unit out on a job site, because there's a lot of variability in the work that gets performed on a daily basis by electricians. And so by extension, given all of that, labor is expensive in this particular skilled trade area, right? It's not like, you know, we work with a lot of concrete companies that do concrete flat work. They could get away with cheap labor sometimes on a project. It's much more difficult to do that in the electrical space. Another challenge that we're all facing right now is, especially as we come out of the pandemic, material prices continue to tick up and to the right. And, you know, we've got some stats here. I'm not going to go through and read the slide for everybody, but, you know, when iron and steel is up 22% compared with the same time last year, right, that impacts conduit pricing. Copper continues to be really expensive. You know, electricians don't use a ton of lumber, but, you know, go to any building supply store and get into a conversation with home builders about what lumber prices are doing to their margins. It's a very real issue, and it's putting the entire industry into a squeeze. And that, plus the rising labor shortage, which we'll talk about some statistics around that in a couple of minutes, it really places a lot of burden on how well you are tracking your productivity, how well you're estimating and bidding new work, and how well you're managing your way through that work as you drive towards the finish line of the project. That is becoming increasingly more important. And we're going to talk about how that mirrors what's happened to some of the other industries in North America in the last 30 years, and how they've had to deal with that margin compression issue when it started coming in on multiple fronts, really hot and heavy. The other thing I think is unique about construction and electrical work, and the reason why I've got the photo of the Ninja Warrior navigating the obstacle course here, that's what happens on every job site in North America every day. Is new obstacles are popping up. And sometimes, you know, you have to be able to be flexible. You have to be able to think creatively. And the shorter the time horizon in which you can react to the unforeseen on your jobs, the better off you're going to be at protecting that long-term margin. And so you really do need well-trained, creative thinkers who are willing to take ownership of the performance of your business and the project they're on, out in the field performing the work. And I think no one's immune from this. And the last bullet point on this slide is the thing that I think a lot of people who haven't worked in the construction industry have a hard time wrapping their head around, software companies included, right? Like, I'm on the software side of this. We're guilty of this all the time. We come up with a cool technological solution. We're like, hey, construction company, you should use this. It'll make you more profitable. But we don't account for the fact that there are new obstacles and new modifications to business process popping up every day on every job site. And your technology has to be flexible enough to be able to navigate around those obstacles the same way your labor is. And so I think that that's another one of the sort of three-headed monster of things that we're all facing, trying to run profitable jobs and to get our labor more productive. And I told you at the beginning, I was going to come at this from more of a technological angle. I think one of the things that a lot of people that work in my part of the market spend a lot of time talking about is this question, which is, why does it feel like cutting edge technology is so hard for construction? And a lot of presentations have been given, a lot of material has been written about construction, quote unquote, labor productivity. And several years back, McKinsey and Company, the big high-priced New York City consulting firm, did a bunch of studies. And they said, the construction industry over the last 50 years has not been able to wring much financial productivity increase out of a unit of labor, right? An hour of someone's time. And if you think about that, I think there's a bunch of reasons for it. And it's not a single faceted problem, which is why I wanted to frame out the labor, the material, and the decision-making stress that we're all under. I think construction continues to grapple with the skilled labor shortage. So those smart, experienced, flexible, creative thinkers who take ownership, they are in short supply. I think the construction industry, especially the skilled trades, we're on the end of the value chain in construction. And because of all this margin compression we're constantly facing, it's very difficult to make speculative investments in new technology. So I feel like a lot of the specialty contractor decision makers that I talk to, they prefer to be a little bit behind the curve as it relates to adopting new tech because they want to adopt things that are proven. And we'll talk about some of the places where I've seen that happen and where I've seen it be really successful in a few minutes. The fact that the vast majority of building projects are kind of one-off prototypes, right? The repeatable work is typically at the granular task level. It's not at the asset level in our industry. And then, because of all these challenges, the thing that I tell all the people that work in software is you got to understand that the way construction companies win business, and they're all competing with each other constantly, is the business process, right? Everybody can wire up, residential multi-unit housing project, but your process for doing that is the unique thing that you sell to the business owner or the general contractor or the specialty contractor that's upstream of you in the project flow. And because of that, I think a lot of specialty trades are unwilling to really be flexible in modifying their business and operational processes in order to use a solution, whatever that solution may be, right? Piece of software, new type of tool, new way of thinking about project management or accounting. I think if it monkeys with your business process, there's a real hesitancy to want to go down that path. And I think that's a really valid reason. And I think it's something that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about at the end here when we talk about how can we get started leveraging technology to help us with the labor crunch. We've got the graphic here that shows these are all of the other industries that have wrung tons of productivity out of a unit of labor over the last 60 years. But I would submit that manufacturing, utilities, agriculture, transport, and warehousing, once you get into the weeds of what those businesses are and how they perform the work, there's very little in common that they share with construction because those other industries can scale up repeatability, and we can't in construction. I think the other thing as it relates to the labor productivity problem space is the pool of available talent continues to shrink at a somewhat frightening rate. If 7,000 electricians who are by and large green, right, no experience, coming right out of the VOTEC school or out of the union training program, yet 10,000 guys and ladies who have tons of experience leave every year. Okay, there's a 3,000 person gap. We can all do math, but all electricians are not created equal. So we're seeing the knowledge bleed out of this industry as well. And we're facing increased demand for people that know how to do the work, right? And so you add that together and you also look down the road another 10 years and it's just like, okay, 20% of the overall construction labor workforce is gearing up to retire. The demand for workers is going to increase. If this country finally gets serious about investing in infrastructure, right, that's going to increase the demand even more than what's currently projected. And so surprise, surprise, by the time we get to the bottom of this bullet list, more than half of contractors are reporting difficulty in finding skilled labor to keep up with the rate of growth. And I would submit that if we talk to the 44% who said they were not reporting difficulty, either they didn't read the survey the right way, or there's something existential that is consuming their focus that's bigger than the labor thing, which is like, okay, you're getting ready to go out of business. I think anybody that is planning to be in the game for at least another 10 years, they're all telling me that finding skilled labor and getting them productive is the number one thing that they're worried about. And it's a number one thing that they're worried about against the backdrop of all of the other things that we were already worried about before the labor shortage hit. The things that I mentioned before, material costs, variability of projects, being on the end of the value chain. One of the things that we should all be thinking about, since it's going to be difficult to manufacture enough skilled labor to fill that massive gap, and because most of the new skilled labor that's going to be coming online in the next 10 years probably isn't going to be trained up to the level that we would like, because it takes time to gain that experience, is what can we do to technologically enable these folks? Make the people that we have in the industry already more productive. And this is where we start getting into the way specialty contractors look at technology. And I think there's a real schism in the way a company looks at sort of your quote unquote hard technology, right? And I'll talk about a really good example of that in a minute. But like, I remember back when I was working as a construction foreman, and cordless power tools became a thing. It was pretty easy to justify the purchase of a bunch of Makita cordless drills to be able to do knockout work and drill it through studs 25 years ago, right? The head of the general contracting firm that I worked for was like, absolutely, why wouldn't I buy a bunch of cordless drills? If you guys aren't dealing with extension cords all day, one, the job site's going to be safer because there's a lot less stuff for you to trip over. Two, you're going to be more productive because you're no longer tethered to an electrical outlet, which may or may not exist on the job site. And three, what are we really talking about here in terms of an investment when I divide a cordless drill out by every single laborer that I've got working on this job site? That was a no-brainer. And for whatever reason, the industry is having a hard time looking at software the same way. And so, the stat here that 70% of construction firms surveyed 2 years ago are dedicating less than 1% of revenue to technology, that's way too low, right? And I get it. Like, you're going to ask me, hey, Bill, where's that money supposed to come from? I think the way to think about it is you should be looking at all of your technology acquisitions with a really short time horizon for payback. So the same way that the owner of the general contracting firm that I worked for when I was in my early 20s looked at the ROI calculation for a bunch of cordless drills for the job site, he knew that he was going to get payback almost immediately because he was going to see an uptick in productivity. So it's real easy to do the back of the bar napkin math and say, you know what, let's go buy a bunch of cordless drills from the Makita rep. I kind of feel like people have started thinking the wrong way about software in this industry because of the history of software in this industry. It's been complex. It's been expensive. It's been difficult to implement. And so everybody thinks that the ROI on a new piece of software may take 1 to 2 years. And what I would tell you is, like, hold people like me accountable for a shorter time frame for the ROI. If I can't prove to you that using my software really quickly I shouldn't be selling you my software. You clearly don't have the money for it because you're dedicating less than 1% of your top line revenue to tech. And I get it. Like, it's hard to find the money to invest in this stuff. So I really think there needs to be a raising of the game as it relates to how we benchmark these investments. And I think if you do, and you start holding people accountable and they start delivering for you, I'm confident that we're going to start to see the money flow a little bit more freely. And as a result, we're going to be able to get more productivity out of our labor force. This is a chart that's going to be hard to read, but you can find this online. It's from that same McKinsey productivity report. And what this is a ranking from McKinsey of the level of quote unquote digitization of a bunch of major industries in North America. Construction is the second one from the bottom, ranking just above the agriculture and hunting industry. And I think one of the reasons why McKinsey had that view of the construction industry when they dug into it is because we haven't done enough to get the pushing of paper out of our daily processes as a business. And so I know from working with some really progressive specialty contractors that have done some time and work studies, I know that the people that you're all paying right now to get work done on job sites are spending too much time filling out paperwork every day. The amount of Microsoft Excel that this industry pushes around just in order to be able to get stuff done and keep track of what's being done is staggering. And there's a giant percentage of this industry that hasn't even gotten to the Excel phase of their digital maturation yet. They're pushing paper around. Like, I've been in job trailers where there's literally still a fax machine in 2020, and that's the way the job site is communicating with the back office to keep track of margin fade on a project. That's just not good enough. And the problem is now you're taking your highest value guys, your experienced people, your foremen, your project leads, and instead of going out there and solving problems and making sure that the labor is highly productive, those guys are being forced to fill paperwork out and chase information around a job site every day. That's a really, really tough ask. And it's costing this industry hundreds of millions of dollars every month. Wall Street agrees with me because in the last couple of years, working in the construction technology industry has been a great place because the investment world is shoveling billions of dollars into software companies that purport to be able to help you make your company and construction more productive. And so some of you who own construction companies that have talked about maybe unloading your business and selling to somebody else, you know the way that conversation goes. You typically start the conversation by saying, what's your top line revenue and what's your profitability? Because I'm going to offer you some multiple of your annual profit. That's what I think your company's worth. In construction technology, the private equity community and these massive multi-billion-dollar global corporations, they're talking to construction technology companies about multiples of your trailing 12-month revenue, not your profit. And so you see businesses like PlanGrid, who solves a very specific set of problems on a construction job site, right? Plans are constantly being updated. RFIs are constantly flowing back and forth between the people that design this thing, either a consulting specifying engineer or an architect, and the people that have to build it. And PlanGrid got bought by Autodesk for almost $1 billion. And the year before they got bought, they did 12-month revenue of closer to $100 million. And so the entire world is looking at our industry saying at some point, the daylight is going to break through the clouds, and this industry is going to figure out how to digitally enable its workforce. And the private equity community is betting that that's going to happen in the next couple of years. The other thing that's going on in the tech space that I think you all should know about that will maybe ease some of your fears about investing in digitally enabling your workforce to be more productive is all this software is getting a lot easier to implement, and it's all talking to each other a lot easier. The company that I work for, Penta Technologies, has been doing construction software since 1968, which is crazy to think about, but it's true. You can look it up. One of the things that we have sort of had as our approach to the market is we want to be able to do everything for all of our customers. And so because we run your accounting system, we also want to manage all your project documentation. We want to take care of all of your asset tracking. We want to be a mini human resources system for your guys because we need all of that in order to run the books for you every month. And in the last 5 years, we've really had to change the way we think about that because there are better solutions to do some of the things that I just rattled off, and they've become more affordable and easier to get rolling than ever before. And so we now have to make sure that our software is able to connect to all of these things. And I think that the days of having to be big enough to employ a giant IT department, i.e. you're a billion-dollar specialty contractor that's rolling people up every 6 months into your portfolio, you don't have to do that anymore. I mean, I've had a ton of conversations with sub $5 million contractors where I'm talking to owners and project managers who are some of the most creative people I've met as it relates to being able to field new technologies. And the reason they can do that now, where maybe they wouldn't have been able to do it 5 or 10 years ago, is the technology is a lot easier to get interoperable with all of the other things that you're using. Another reason why I think this industry has been slow to embrace this as a way to deal with the labor crunch is employee acceptance, right? The people that have always done it the way they've always done it, and they will throw the big orange hand signal up in front of you when you say, hey, I want you to do this on an iPad now, or I want you to use a computer. I think the thing that's fixing that is time and the evolving demographics of our workforce, right? I think if you start confronting the people who say, I don't want to use software to do my job on a job site, and you start asking them if they own a smartphone, right? Do they take taxi cabs everywhere, or have they figured out how to use Uber? Because Uber is probably easier for them than using a taxi cab. Are they on Facebook? Are they emailing their friends and family and doing Facebook Messenger? Or are they still writing letters out and putting them in the mail with stamps on them and driving them to the post office? I think what you're going to find is these people who are throwing the challenge flag in front of you, they're not doing it because they're allergic to technology or because technology is too hard to use. They're doing it because of some of these other reasons, right? Dysfunction between the IT team and the operations team. They don't understand the value of digitizing what they're doing. Leadership isn't out in front driving this stuff and mandating it. They're also dealing with all the other stuff I talked about in the first 10 minutes of this conversation. And so you got to really place the new technology in their context. Hey, I realize that you're already overloaded and you're working 60 hours a week and it's difficult wrangling all the guys on the job site and dealing with the general. But the reason why I'm here with this technology today is because we've thought deeply about all of that. And the technology that I want you to try is going to take away 2 or 3 of those stressors that you're dealing with every day. And if it doesn't, I will get rid of the technology, because I've told these guys from the software company that if my guys can't figure it out and I can't get ROI in 90 days, I'm not going to use it. Like, that's a much better way to have the technology conversation with your field staff than, hey, guess what? Surprise, surprise. Starting tomorrow, we're all going to do what we've done for the last 5 years completely differently. A model for this, and I did not come up with this, so I have to give attribution to where it's deserved. The CIO for one of our customers, a company called Lithco, they're a really big concrete contractor in Cincinnati with a national presence. They're probably $1 billion company now. He talks about how we went from the shovel to the backhoe, right? And when we did, it was pretty obvious that a backhoe is a much better way to dig a hole for a large construction project than 100 guys armed with shovels. And so how did we make that shift? because the amount of technology that goes into a modern Caterpillar earth mover is like 10 times more complicated than anything that I've got going on in any of the software that my company produces. We're talking about big, potentially sometimes 7-figure investments in a piece of tech that gets capitalized and then gets billed into the projects. Like, we've figured out a way to jam that into the cost structure, jam that into the business process, jam that into the financial accounting, and the business is better off for it. And so as we kind of move into what should we do about this, how can we get started using technology to make our labor force more productive? The reason I start with this image and this slide is I really think that there are some repeatable ways of thinking about this that are already pre-existing in our industry that just need to be applied a little bit differently, because software is no different. You should look at the new piece of software the same way you look at the decision to buy a huge piece of equipment for your business, right? Maybe a new bucket truck, right? I think that the way to think about this, and I'm going to start kind of at the executive level because that's where I spend a lot of my time. I think you have to make the case that it just makes good financial sense, right? So technology should be pointed directly at one of the already articulated pain points you have, right? It's going to help me make the labor more productive because it's very expensive and very difficult to hire enough people to do the work. Or it's going to help me reduce the impact of the unavoidable variability in my projects, right? The other way that I love to sell technology and technology investments and bigger technology budgets to owners and principals of construction companies is I talk about the way being tech-enabled increases the valuation of your business. So, you know, the FANG stocks, right? Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, Netflix, Google. Right now, those companies put together are worth almost 20% of the total S&P 500. The vast majority of them are not particularly profitable, right? So if they got into a conversation that some of you might have to get into if you ever want to sell your construction business, having conversations about multiples of their EBITDA or multiples of their net profit at the end of the year, not super exciting for any of those guys, right? Jeff Bezos is not going to be one of the 5 richest guys in the world if we're valuing Amazon based on his annual profits. The reason why the stock market invests so much in those 5 companies is because they're technologically enabled, and being technologically enabled is the future for business. And so you can add that to your talking points for your business, that we're tech forward, we're progressive. We think deeply about our technology roadmap and how we leverage technology to wring every last bit of productivity out of this business. Like, that is a conversation that owners in the construction space are starting to respond to more and more. I also think that whole look, I'm not asking you to walk out on the ledge with me and take it on faith that if we spend $50,000 getting a new piece of software for the guys in the field, that we're going to be waiting with bated breath for another 3 years to find out whether or not we're going to get the $50,000 back. I think you can work inside really short investment horizons, which means that these technological bets should be smaller than the big capital equipment bets that you're already making, that your business already knows how to think through. And so I think being able to start the conversation that way with your stakeholders who are going to have to sign off on technologically empowering your workforce, keeping it at that high level and speaking the language they understand is a really important way to get this conversation off on the right foot. The other thing I think we should all be doing is we should be looking for solutions that eliminate the repetitive administrative work. We ask our labor force in this industry to do a staggering amount of that stuff. The number of job sites I've been on in the last 5 years, I don't know how all of the work gets done. It's quite frankly amazing because there's a whole elaborate organizational phase to get ready to perform the work. Then there's the actual performance of the work, which if taken in isolation is complicated enough. And then afterwards, you're expecting your guys to remember everything that happened and put it into a report so that it can get funneled into your back office, run through by a project controls person or a construction job cost accountant. And then we all get together and we look at the productivity reports every month, or maybe if you're really good, every week. I feel like the turn this industry needs to make right now is we need to make all of that stuff easy so we can vacuum up that data without making our guys do a ton of work. And I think we should be looking at that data in much smaller slices of time. Because quite frankly, if you're looking at this stuff every month, there are bad things that are happening on every job that you're running right now. And if you're not going to see it for another 29 days, it's 29 days too late. And so I think that's where it becomes critical to think about bringing the right technologies on board. Do these pieces of technology make my guys' lives easier immediately? What is the learning curve for this stuff, right? The example that I use all the time, and I drill this into our software developers at Penta, my grandmother's 96 years old. And if I sat my grandmother down with an iPad with a video poker app, I guarantee you that in 5 minutes, I could get her to figure out how to play video poker through the internet, which 25 years ago would have sounded like a story out of a science fiction movie, but it is a very real thing. And if people can make software that easy to use for my 96-year-old grandmother, they should be able to make it that easy to use for your really smart, really experienced people out in the field. And if the software doesn't do that, don't use it. And tell the software vendor that that's why you're not going to use it, because it's just too hard to use. And I think the other thing is, and this ties back to that interoperability talking point from earlier, I think starting to figure out where all of the sources of truth are on your job site is a necessary step on the path to getting to a single source of truth, right? And for a lot of you, the sources of truth are highly fragmented. I've had a lot of conversations with experienced project managers, and one of my favorite questions to ask those folks is, how do you know you're winning or losing on a job? And all too frequently, the answer that I hear is, well, I have to go walk the site, or I look out the window of my job trailer. And what's funny is a lot of times when I get that answer, I'm standing in a corporate office talking to that project manager. I'm not on a job site and I'm nowhere near the window of a job trailer. And so then that leads into the next conversation of, okay, if you have to go out and query a bunch of people on the job site to figure out what's going on, what are you doing here? And what they're doing in the office is usually taking all the information they got from their last visit to the job site and translating it so it can get uploaded into what the business thinks is the quote unquote single source of truth. And so I think we gotta really inspect that, especially those of you that have operational responsibility in your business, getting that catalog of where all the information is and figuring out how to remove all the friction and all the time out of how long it takes to get that information into a usable format that you could use to arm your guys to make smarter decisions. That is absolutely critical. And I'm going to tell you right now, technology is by far the best tool set to be able to do that. The other thing I think, and this is a little bit of a reminder, 3 questions you should always ask whenever you're looking at a productivity solution. What's the potential productivity payoff? What does implementation and day-to-day use look like? Can this significantly improve my bottom line? And all 3 of those questions should have a part B attached to them, which is how long until you prove it to me, software or technology person, because we're in a high pressure environment and I'm going to need to know that it's working really quickly. And then the last thing I want to leave with everybody, and then hopefully we'll have 15 minutes for some Q&A, is ways to zoom all the way out and think about that strategic technology approach for your business, right? And so I think these 3 things are important to keep in mind when you're doing your business planning. I highly recommend that if you're doing more than $1 million in top line revenue right now, when you get together and you have your planning sessions to think about where the business is going to go in the next year or the next 3 years, I really would strongly suggest that you spend a little bit of time thinking about your technology plan for your business. And I think you need to ask yourself and the people you trust on your team, do we feel like we're getting high quality information, accurate information about what's going on every day inside this business? Where the labor is being applied, what's getting done, how much it's costing me. Are we making smarter decisions about that every day? Are you getting everybody on the same team when you try something new? Don't let your IT department drive technology. Don't let the accountants in the back office drive technology. Your ops guys and ladies need to be a part of that technology discussion from the very beginning. And I realize that it's really difficult to take your revenue generating resources offline, to sit in a conference room or to jump on a web meeting and talk about technology. But again, I think if you force everybody to articulate, when am I going to get the time and money back because I'm investing when I do that, I think what you're going to find is the payback will be rapid by involving the right people in the conversation. And then the last thing, and this is something where I'll share some personal experience where I think software companies, at least modern progressive ones, look a lot like construction companies, is in this executing and iterating phase. So when people ask me to describe what it's like running a software company in 2021, I tell them, in your mind, envision that you're at a row of long folding tables, and on these folding tables is like 100 jack-in-the-boxes, right? Those are the things that you need to build into your software. Each one represents a new thing you have to build. And you don't know what's inside each one of those jack-in-the-boxes until you step up to it and wind the crank and see what pops out of it. Sometimes it might be a little funny clown and you have a chuckle and you can move on to the next one. Sometimes it might be a 400-pound gorilla that you have to wrestle to the ground before you can proceed. Construction is no different. And one of the ways that I see construction and software kind of working on parallel paths is this whole short interval scheduling work breakdown structure model. In software, we call it agile. And so in our software business, everything we do is in 2-week increments. Now, we employ people who are looking out in a much longer time horizon than 2 weeks. They're looking at the entire project. But the people who are doing the work, the people building the software inside our company, they're consumed by what they need to get done in the next 2 weeks. And I am on top of that activity like white on rice every day, because I know that when the 400-pound gorilla pops up out of one of those jack-in-the-boxes, I want to be there arming the people that are doing the work with the tools they need to get that thing wrestled to the ground so we can move on to the next thing. And technology has been a great way to keep me plugged into all of that activity inside my business. And so when you iterate like this, you can take smaller bets more frequently, which I think is one of the recurring themes of this presentation and this talk. And I think by taking those smaller bets more frequently inside your business, you're really just taking the playbook that you're already using in order to get things built and applying it to transforming the way you think about enabling your labor to be more productive. And so that is it for my slide. So I'm now going to throw it back over to my friend Mike, and we could get into a little bit of discussion and Q&A.
Okay, Bill, great. Very enlightening presentation. Hopefully you've gotten the attendees to think about this in a totally different manner than they may have thought about it in the past. I found it very thought-provoking. So thank you for sharing your vision and, at such a high level, and then digging down into some silos. Fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
For the audience, just real quickly, again, if you want to submit a question, go ahead and type it into the question box there and hit submit, and we'll take a look at what you might have some questions around at this point. And also, just wanted to let everybody know that there is a feedback form which we'd like for you to fill out. Give us some feedback, give Bill some feedback on presentation, share your thoughts with them through that survey as well. So we appreciate the feedback that you provide us, because it helps us prepare presentations for future webinars that we work with our various partners. And so with that, let's jump into the questions, Bill. I'll throw the first one out here at you. And so as we've seen in the industry over the last several years, modular fabrication has taken on a trend in the industry. Industrial, commercial, construction, obviously in those sectors. The person wants to know, is this expected to grow, and how does this might play into some of your thoughts on the software front?
Yeah. I mean, I have the luxury of working with a fair number of MEP contractors, right? And I think the M and the P are pretty far down the prefab path by now, right? It's like pretty much every HVAC specialty contractor that I get to work with that's doing more than 50 million a year in revenue, they have a warehouse where they're knocking together tin in a safe, clean, organized, repeatable environment. And then all that stuff gets loaded onto flatbed trucks and trucked out to the job site for the final install. I think this trend is going to continue, but I think the boom, and this is totally personal opinion, right? I think the boom is starting to taper, because I feel like we've moved all of the easy, obvious things to prefab. And I think we're going to continue to deal with challenges related to building codes that would allow us to really, really lean hard into the prefab thing the way they are in other parts of the world. And so for electrical contractors, what I would say is, like, how do you guys think about prefab? Because, like, one of the interesting things, we used to have a guy at Penta who was a licensed union electrician who worked in account management for us. And he talked about prefab just from the perspective of getting all the lighting ballasts that he would have to install delivered prepared, so that all he had to do was connect it up to mains electricity, as opposed to having to be like a guy with a bunch of IKEA furniture putting all these lights together every day. And so I think what I would say is, like, in the electrical universe, what are the things that you could get from the manufacturer already prefabricated? Are there things, like panels that you could be taking care of in the panel shop? What can you do there? But I think, like, that's probably about as far as this industry is going to go for the near term future, until we have some real fundamental changes to building design and building codes as it relates to really driving the prefab movement from the top of the value chain on down.
Okay, great. Great advice. We've got a couple of mechanical publications, and totally agree with you that over on the plumbing and mechanical side, they do a lot of that work right now. All right, moving on. We've got a question that's come in from Martin. How small is too small to start looking into these technological changes? And I'm assuming he's probably talking about size of firm.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lower bound. So one of the things that I've been getting into with our STRUXI product is we've been talking to a lot more contracting firms that you would consider like SMBs, right? Small, mid-sized businesses. And we have people that we've talked to that are running QuickBooks, right? Not a particularly high, definitely not construction specific accounting system, but people who employ less than 20 laborers in the field are building customized workflows in some of these off-the-shelf software products to be able to vacuum up job site data. And so I really feel like it's not a size or a sophistication or a money thing. It really is, how do you think about this? Do you think that if you infused a little bit more technology into your business, could you make it more productive? And given the way technology has expanded and become so much easier to use and so much more affordable in the last 10 years, I really think that all of this stuff could potentially scale down like a 5-person electrical shop.
Great. Good information. So in talking about your actual company and STRUXI, Emmanuel asks, how does STRUXI perform compared to your competitors? Is there a free trial associated with your product?
Yeah, so one of the things we did with STRUXI, we priced it really affordably, and we do offer a free trial because basically what it does is it vacuums up when are all of your guys on the job site, and it allows your foreman or project manager to do cost code level accounting with those hours really quickly and really easily. And what I told the team when we built it, I don't have any interest in building a piece of software that's going to take weeks and weeks of training to get somebody to use it. I need to be able to train the laborers over a toolbox talk the first morning it's available, and I need to be able to get all the foremen trained in under a half hour. And because of that, it doesn't cost us anything to allow you to try it free on a project. And I think that's a really good litmus test to put all of your potential software vendors through. What's it going to take for me to get up and running on one project? And are you asking me to commit tens of thousands of dollars into an annual contract with you before I get to see if this thing's actually even going to be able to help me?
Okay, great questions come in. It's one that's come up before, and I'd love to hear how you answer this one, Bill. So this came in from Thomas, and he says, as an electrical subcontractor, we're at the mercy of many GCs that still push paper requirements. So what's the conversation we need to have to bring these GCs along?
Yeah. I mean, the way I describe the value chain in construction from a specialty contractor's perspective to people who haven't lived it is, imagine a bullwhip and the specialty contractors on the one end and the GC and the owner developer are on the other end, and you never know when they might crack that whip, right? and so one of the things that happens is general contractors love to force project management software on subs. They love to push requirements for paper and substantiation on the subs. And I really think generals are starting to change how they think about this. If they weren't, Procore wouldn't be worth $4 billion right now. And I think if you're a sub and you feel like the GC is part of the reason why you're stuck in the dark ages with this stuff, I think you got to sit down and have the conversation about dollars and cents with them, because there's a cost associated to being forced to push all of that paper. And I get it that sometimes the GC will be like, hey, if you don't like it, I will find a sub that does, and we'll go with the low bid on this, and you'll be iced out of the business. But I really think if more subs were pushing back on the GCs related to how the GC can help create an environment where the subcontractor could be a lot more productive for them, I think there's a lot of rich veins to mine in that space. I'm seeing it a lot with safety right now, where GCs want tons of safety reporting, typically in paper forms from subs, but some subs are pushing back saying, hey, I want to use a technological solution to analyze job site safety in real time. And I think you, Mr. or Mrs. Subcontractor, should have to pay for it because you're the one that's responsible for the environment where I'm going to have my guys operating and gals, and they're very expensive and they're hard to replace when they get hurt. And so I think, like, let's leverage some of that playbook to have the productivity and paper pushing conversation with the GCs. And maybe at some point in an idealistic future, we can all meet in the middle where we need to be in order to support this stuff up and down that chain.
Love the analogy there about the bullwhip. Yeah, it can go both ways for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Paul's got a good question for you here. What different approach might we take on analyzing our service department to promote efficiency?
Yeah, I love service business, as I'm sure those of you that do it do as well, because it's so much higher margin typically, and it can be nice, predictable work once you get it to a certain scale. I think one of the things that I see with contractors that have a nice service revenue component in their business is that, unfortunately, through no fault of their own and through no real intended drive, they end up taking on massive amounts of operational back office burden in order to support the service business. And the way they justify it to themselves when, okay, now I got to hire a bunch of people to do dispatch with a whiteboard. Okay, now I need to hire somebody that's managing all these service contracts to make sure that we're meeting all the SLAs. Okay, now I need to get a dedicated billing person into my business. I see companies justify all that because of the fat margin. And so what I would say is take the margin conversation off the table, because it's great that your service business is profitable enough that you could pay for all this overhead. Take the money out of it and just look at it as a set of operational processes and start thinking about where the pinch points are and where you're having a hard time delivering a quality service experience, which then leads to frustrated customers, which leads to price compression or more competition for your service business, and start there as opposed to chasing after the money. Because I think service delivery is a different ball of wax for most construction companies. And the more friction you could remove from the service delivery experience for your customers, the more sticky those customers are going to be, and the more money you'll eventually be able to wring out of them with service contracts.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's great advice on that front for sure. So, Roger, Roger's got a question that actually I was going to ask a very similar one to you myself. Yeah. And it has to do with kind of the younger generation a bit, and, you know, how these younger people coming into the industry, the ones that we are able to get right now, they're much more tech savvy. And so do you see technology as an attraction to bring in the level of interest and excitement that we might have not had in the trades, and that's going to help push along this adoption of technology as we move forward?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. My mind goes to, I read an article last week where somebody had the hypothesis that the labor shortage in construction is because we don't message appropriately to parents. And I was like, that's complete BS. Because like, I don't want the parents to join the skilled trades to work on the job site. I want their kids. I need to message to the kids.
We don't need the helicopter parents.
This question really drives at the heart of that, which is, what are they looking for in a career? And I think what they want is more progressive opportunities, right? They want upward mobility. They want to be able to pay back all the loans that they took on in order to buy that first house or start that family or pay for an advanced degree or a vocational education. They want to know that the business values them as an individual and as a collective group. And I think using technology as a way to prove that that's the way your business thinks about your workforce can be a really powerful tool. What I can tell you is some of the electrical contractors that we work with that are north of that $150 million in revenue mark, they're on LinkedIn every day promoting what a great culture they have and how everybody's technologically enabled and their business is a safe place to work. And the reason they're doing that is because that's increasingly where the talent is located. They're on LinkedIn, they're on Facebook, they're not gathering down at the local union hall as much as they used to. And I think that that could become a powerful recruiting message for your business if you do it right. And the great thing is you don't have to be spending billions of dollars a year on technology in order to be able to have that message.
That's fantastic. Yes, definitely. So we've kind of gotten to a point here where we're right at the top of the hour. So I just want to go ahead and wrap things up here at this point. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We appreciate your interest. We appreciate the great questions you submitted. I'd really like to thank Bill for, like I said, I thought his presentation really was thought-provoking and should get a lot of you thinking more about technology and how you really, if you have not started down that path, you really need to start to think about how you can do it. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that he offered up today, start in small chunks. You've got to start somewhere. You can't sit on the sidelines. You've got to get involved somehow. So thanks so much to Bill. Thanks to STRUXI and Penta Technologies for supporting the webinar today. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon and great rest of the day. And Bill, thank you. If you want to say something in closing, that's fine. We'll wrap it up right after you're finished.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, team at EC&M. This was a pleasure. And, you know, I like to push this industry because I care about it and I want all of you to be successful. So if there's anything I could ever do to help you, feel free to reach out. I'm easy to find on the internet.
Great.